Good evening. Today is December 24th, 2020. It's Christmas Eve. Hope everybody is ready for Christmas and everybody has a good time today, tomorrow, and throughout the holidays. As you know, as many of you know, I'm very fond of dates and anniversaries. And I can remember on Christmas Eve 1980, exactly 40 years ago today, I was pastor of Macedonia AME Church in Kaufman, Texas. My family had moved to Kaufman a few months earlier, and we were, I was sitting in a Mexican restaurant drinking some tea. That's what I got right here. As I was reading a portion of a book by the late William J. Whalen called Handbook of Secret Organizations. Professor Whalen taught at Purdue University in Indiana for years, and he and I corresponded. When he wrote his book, uh, Christianity and American Freemasonry, a revised edition of it, I'm listed as one of the Masons he consulted, stating we agree to disagree. But in this book I mentioned, Handbook of Secret Organizations, he mentions, has a lot of discussion about the Roman Catholic opposition to Freemasonry, and says that the Second Vatican Council that met in Rome off and on between 1962 and 1965, did nothing to alter the church's stand against Masonry, although a Mexican bishop did call for better relations between Catholics and Masons. And that stuck in my mind. It was years later before I researched it more thoroughly. But who was this Mexican bishop? And what did he have to say? Well, if you do not know, the Second Vatican Council, better known as Vatican II, addressed the relations between the Catholic Church and the modern world. It brought about the Mass in vernacular as the language of the people rather than Latin, and made many, many changes in the Church. It was one of the major events of the 20th century without question, and it formally opened under the pontificate of Pope John the 23rd on October 11, 1962. It was closed under that of Pope Paul VI on December 8, 1965. Uh, Sadly, Pope John the 23rd passed away on June 3rd, 1962, and I believe it was on June 22nd that Paul was elected as his um, successor. The Prior to this time, the Church had denounced Protestants as heretics, Eastern Orthodox as schismatics, and Pope John, who was my favorite pope, uh, re declared these are our separated brethren. And they also had a section in which they denounced racism, including anti Semitism. It declared the Jews could not be held collectively responsible for the death of Jesus, and called for greater dialogue with non Christian religions, with positive things said about Islam, Buddhism, and Hinduism. But what about the Masons, and who was this guy? Well, it was on December 11th, 1962, this Mexican prelate, whose name was Sergio Mendez or Arceo, they used the honorific title of Don Sergio, was called the Red Bishop of Cuernavaca. He delivered a speech on Catholic relations with Jews and Freemasons, denouncing the unconscious anti Semitism widespread among many Catholics, and arguing that it was wrong to continue making Freemasons the object of recrimination, especially since it was now well known the origins of Freemasonry were anything but anti Christian, and the various Masonic trends were definitely in favor of reconciliation with the Church. And so, um, the more I learned about Don Sergio, the better I liked him. He was born on October 28, 1907, in Tlalpan, Mexico. My pronunciations are not that good. His father was a successful lawyer. His uncle was a prominent archbishop, believed to have been involved in the church-state conflict of the 1920s. He graduated from the Pontifical Gregorian University in Rome and served as a seminary professor in Mexico. He became Bishop of Cuernavaca in the province of Morelos in 1952, serving in this capacity for 31 years. He retired in 1983. He stated in 1970, Christianity and socialism can coexist. He encouraged President Luis Echeverria to form a committee of notable citizens to examine Mexico's most serious social and economic problems. The president viewed the bishop as the foremost proponent of liberation theology and favored his emphasis on redistribution of wealth to the poor. Echeverria believed the clergy could help the people of Mexico learn the best means of organizing themselves in a capitalist society. In Mendez's view, the meaning of organizing was labor unions. The means of organizing was labor unions, which he viewed as the essential to the base of community organizing. He was first called by the honorific Spanish title of Don Sergio by the workers for whom he provided support in his Sunday sermons. He maintained the title for the remainder of his life. And he didn't have a background that you'd think he'd be involved in something like this. At the age of 19, he joined the so-called Cristeros, an organization of reactionaries who, in the name of Christ, fought vigorously against ecumenism, Protestantism, Masonry, and communism. What his enemies would like to overlook is the continuing evidence in his life of grace that changes hearts and life direction, the conversions that have characterized the career of the bishop. From his early youthful misdirections, and everybody makes mistakes, and certainly time of youth, as I'm approaching 70, I can look back over my younger years and say, man, that was awful stupid. And a lot of times it's indiscretion more than anything else. He made his mistakes, but he was to pursue a more traditional course, receiving a typical theological education, then going on to take a doctorate in church history. As bishop, he became responsible for a notable development of theological education in his diocese. Then in 1962 attended Vatican II as an influential delegate and representative of his people. In all these respects, he appears to be a distinguished leader within the mainstream and the tradition of the church, but scarcely a liberation theologian. But in his late 50s, the first and perhaps most notable of his conversions took place by the strange movement of the Holy Spirit and a new encounter with the Word of God. Don Sergio was carried, as it were, to a new place. God gave him, together with his cathedral and diocese, to the poor, to the campesinos and obreros, to the peasants of the country and workers of the city. He sought to be faithful to God and to the personal advice of Pope John the 23rd. From your own consciousness and conscience, take it from here. He simplified the arrangement of the cathedral, preserving only two images, the crucifix and Our Lady of Guadalupe, the apparition of the Blessed Virgin Mary that appeared to the Aztec peasant Juan Diego in 1531, is now considered the patron saint of Mexico. Back on December 12th, I did a video about her. And the cathedral began its new life in an ecumenical spirit, with doors and windows open to a new age. The Diocese of Cuernavaca was prepared for a true dialogue with the modern world. And Don Sergio was an advocate of the Vatican II principles, which moved from changes in ritual distribution of the sacraments, the emphasis on saints, more study of the Bible, and sociological studies to aid ecclesiastical organization. With the coming of theological reform of Vatican II, he welcomed mariachi music and vernacular Spanish in Sunday worship. Cuernavaca was reportedly the site of the very first mariachi mass, which is quite common today in Spanish-speaking Catholic congregations. And he attended a number of conferences and was very influential bishop, a speaker, and in April of 1972, he attended the Christians for Socialism conference in Santiago, Chile. He was the only member of the Mexican episcopate to attend. The conference was the first continent-wide gathering of its kind, composed of Catholics and Protestants. And it is stated that the conference delegates included the most radical of those involved in liberation theology. They attempted to find a synthesis between Christianity and socialism. The gathering was soon after banned by the Chilean episcopate. Liberation theology takes many forms, but what liberation theologians have in common is generally the belief that God sides with the oppressed against the oppressor. People may be oppressed for different reasons. Certainly racism, race, color, nationality can be a barrier which discrimination and oppression. All this goes together, but it can also be an economic matter. And the gender can be an issue. Racism, sexism, and classism are all forms of oppression. And the viewpoint of liberation theologians is that God takes the side of those who are victim of oppression, regardless of what form that oppression might be. And during his last 20 years, the Diocese of Cuernavaca was the site of an above average and growing Protestant population. As early as 1962, he proposed ecumenism as a key to any Christian's life. He considers all Christians, regardless of belief, to be members of the same church. Thus, in 1966, the diocese began inviting Protestant community to celebrate January 18th through the 25th as the Week of Unity. And Don Sergio's progressive turn during the years of Vatican II was coupled with tolerance for non-Catholics. One can see the ecumenism as a source of his openness to other traditionally taboo subjects, including Marxism and feminism. He was deeply ecumenical up until the end, and but he felt like neither Catholics nor Protestants should be able to call the shots. Both voices had to be heard, and if either side tried to monopolize, then you don't have true ecumenism. We can gather together to pray. It would have eventually, they say, we can pray, but we can't discuss politics. He wanted to establish common ground with his fellow Christian brothers and sisters, but not if it meant that he and his fellow Catholics could not participate as full members. Nobody wants to be a second-class citizen of anything. In 1977, he celebrated his 25th anniversary as Bishop of Cuernavaca by reacquainting himself with every corner of his diocese. And it's reasonable to infer the design of his Jubilee year or anniversary celebration was in part an attempt by the bishop to win back sectors of the church he had been losing. So, no big I, little U. The campesinos in the base communities were as important as the big donors in the big cities. Eventually, his role in the labor struggle changed him from conflict mediator to movement supporter, which caused a great deal of trouble. And on April 17, 1981, he excommunicated all who practiced torture. On this Good Friday of 1981, in keeping with my duty as a pastor, a servant of the life and dignity of humankind, I decree the punishment of excommunication to the torturers. Then on October 28, 1982, he reached the church's mandatory retirement age of 75. And but he continued to minister as a common priest in Ocotepeque, Mexico, from the time of his retirement until his death on February the 6th, 1992. Interment was in the vault of the cathedral that he reshaped and restored. Don Sergio Mendez Arceo Prize for Human Rights since 1993 has been awarded to individuals and organizations considered outstanding for their bravery in defense and promotion of the culture of respect for human rights. He has his admirers. He also has his detractors. Nobody can please everybody. And obviously the traditional Catholics, Tradcat group, who oppose all the changes brought by Vatican II, attacked him and claiming he was a closet Mason, and that he called for the revocation of the 1738 bull of Pope Clement XII, which forbade Catholics from joining Masonic lodges under penalty of excommunication. And some of the Tradcat group blamed Freemasons for many of the problems within the church and charged clergy with whom they disagree, including Pope John the 23rd, as being Freemasons. And in writing the article I did for the Luxi Tenebras and was later reprinted in the Philaxis magazine, I wrote to a number of Masonic orders in Mexico about any dealings they had with Bishop Mendez. Sadly, none of them wrote me back. I sent letters, emails. I tried to reach out to scholars in the area. And if and when such information comes through, I would love to rewrite the article based on new information. Sometimes it's hard to get through, especially with a language barrier and other things. But it was on this day 40 years ago I first read about the Mexican bishop who at Vatican II called for better relations between Catholics and Masons. And that was Don Sergio Mendez Arceo. Truly a great man of God. We need more people like him today. And I wish everybody a happy and blessed Christmas. God bless.